What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, and this is your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, analysis, and so much more. I'm so happy to be back. Took a short vacation, but finally back home and able to dive into talking about the team that I love so much and talking about the Detroit Lions and some of the recent things that are basically happening with the team. We are currently on our march to training camp, and that is a time that I think we can all be really excited for because that's when football really starts to feel close. That's when everything that is happening on that practice field, really starts to build towards, or at least feels like it's building towards the regular season and helping this team, get that much closer to winning football games, winning the division, and hopefully making that march into the postseason towards a Super Bowl. So super excited for that time of year. We're still a few weeks out from training camp officially kicking off for the Lions, who will be reporting earlier than other teams. But in the meantime, I still think there's plenty of things that we can talk about in the offseason in terms of what we should be expecting as a fan base going forward into this season. And I got to give a shout out to Tim Twentyman, the lead writer over at DetroitLions.com. He recently did an article where he decided to highlight the top 5 Lions players that were under the age of 25. And it's a really good article if you haven't had a chance to check it out and see the players that Tim decided to highlight. And I felt there were a couple players that he kind of left out. Not to say that the players that he highlighted were wrong, because I think in Tim's article, he definitely hits on a lot of the big names that we would all think of when you think about players that are currently under the age of 25 that at least fans and probably the rest of the league are really honed in on. But at the same time, this Lions roster is still fairly young, and there are still plenty of other players that I thought obviously could make a appearance on that list. So while Tim did a really good job of highlighting 5 players that are under 25 or at or under 25 to kind of keep an eye on, I'm looking specifically at this season. And I think there are 5 guys that weren't on that list that actually are just as important to keep an eye on specifically for the upcoming season that the Lions are about to, kick off. So I'm going to run through my list of 5, and I'm really hoping that you guys would jump into the comments and let me know if there's anyone else that you think should have made this list. I'm also going to do like Tim. He had an honorable mention. I do have one honorable mention that didn't quite make my list, but I do want to at least talk about them near the end of this video. So definitely stay tuned for that. With that said, let's go ahead and kick off this list. At my number 1 spot, this one is fairly obvious in the same way that Tim's number 1 was obvious in Penei Sewell. I'm going on the other side of the defensive line, and I'm going with Aidan Hutchinson. Aidan Hutchinson, to me, is still a player that Lions fans should absolutely be locked into, especially going into the season. Aiden had a phenomenal season last year. 7.5 sacks, 45 pressures, was really on that trek to being a really strong defensive player of the year candidate with the way that he was terrorizing quarterbacks and terrorizing offensive lines. But unfortunately, we all know he suffers that broken leg against the Dallas Cowboys, and basically he is out for the rest of the season. Obviously, yes, there were those murmurs about him possibly making it back for the Super Bowl if the Lions had gotten there, but obviously seeing how long it took him to get cleared, that never actually materialized. So with that being said, going into the season, Aiden is very high on my must-watch list for a number of reasons. One, we're talking about him coming back from a very serious injury and being able to see, can he reclaim the status that he was at last year? Like I said, he was marching towards being, an all-pro, marching towards being a defensive player of the year candidate. If he can come back after, rehabbing, after having the surgery, doing all of those things, and he can reclaim that status, that is going to be huge, not just for him personally, but also for this defense that really missed him last year once he went down with that injury. It's going to be really interesting to see, can he again get to that status of being, can he get his second Pro Bowl nod? Can he get his first All-Pro nod? Obviously, the NFC is very stacked with pass rushers, but I still think that Aiden, when he was healthy and with the way that he's been progressing over the last couple of years, could come out at the end of this season as being the best pass rusher in the entire NFC if he's able to reclaim form, be healthy, and perform at the level that we were seeing him perform at last year. Now, number 2 on this list shouldn't surprise people either. This person did make it into Tim's honorable mentions list, but he's number 2 on my list, and that's going to be Jameson Williams. Now, I know we've talked a lot about JMO this offseason. Us here at POD have talked a lot about him. The team has talked about him. Dan, Amon-Ra, all of the coaches, everyone has had a lot to say about JMO going into this year. And based off of how he performed last year, 58 receptions, over 1,000 yards with 7 touchdowns, it is fair to wonder, going into this year, if JMO can get rid of the distractions and really just focus in on football, Could he be in line to, really establish himself as one of the top wide receivers in the NFL? Could he get himself a Pro Bowl nod? All of those things are worth watching when you talk about someone who's as electric and as explosive as JMO is. Again, Morgan and I have been on that bandwagon all offseason, buying all the hype that is being said about him. We heard about him coming in, looking like he put a little bit more size on, still being just as fast, still being just as disruptive. And obviously with Amon-Ra not being out there for OTAs and things like that, JMO got a lot more opportunities. And so it's going to be interesting to see like how those opportunities translate going into the season, especially with him. And I guess the same thing could be said for Aiden as well. Both of them having their 5th-year options picked up. So both of them are looking to be extended long-term. And in order for that thing to become like an automatic given, specifically for JMO, because I feel like it's already a given for Aiden, but for it to be a given for JMO, it's going to require him to have another really big season going into 2025. Now, number 3 on this list is going back to the defensive side. And this is someone that I'm a little surprised didn't make Tim's list. I'm going to go with Jack Campbell. Jack had a great sophomore season, finally getting the nod at the middle linebacker spot and being the guy that's making all the calls and really having to do it with both missing Derek Barnes at times and missing Alex Anzalone. I think Jack really rose to the occasion last year, but I think he's still worth watching going into this upcoming season. 131 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. That's a great stat line for a second-year middle linebacker. He still, though, did only have a 77 overall defensive grade according to PFF. And so my question for Jack, and the thing that I'm going to be watching for as we go into this next season, is, hey, can he take it up just another notch? Can he start to creep into that conversation of being a top 15, maybe, a top 10 linebacker in the NFL? Because when you look at his skill set, when you look at his ability to read and react, when you look at his ability to play coverage, when you look at his ability to fill rushing lanes as far as supporting in the run game and all of those types of things, Jack has all of the skills that he's a very good athlete as well. He's someone that has proven that he's willing to do any and everything that's asked of him. I really do wonder, with him and Shep now being the DC here in Detroit, can they kind of have this type of partnership that puts Jack in even more positions to succeed and take on even more responsibilities? Again, someone that has something that he's been able to do a lot of, with Alex Anzalone not taking part in a lot of the off-season activities and practices and things like that. We're getting to see Jack take on even more responsibilities, which is something that I think was one of the reasons that the Lions drafted him in the first place. They saw everything that he was doing at Iowa as that middle linebacker that was taking on so much responsibility of that defense. I think they're starting to get that exact type of player now going into year 3. And kind of like JMO, could he possibly get his first Pro Bowl now when you start talking about him playing at a really high level, especially if he's able to have back-to-back seasons where he has over 100 tackles and maybe can get a few more tackles for loss or maybe a couple interceptions here or there? I think that could be just the thing to help push Jack to that next level in terms of how he's viewed across the NFL as one of those better middle linebackers in the league. Number 4 on my list is another player that's going to be coming off of injury, and it's going to take a little bit longer to see him, but he's still someone that I'm going to have my eyes on once he's made available, and that is none other than Aleem McNeil. Aleem is the defensive tackle that the Lions need in the middle of that defense. Yes, they went out and they drafted Tyleik Williams. Yes, they have DJ Reader, but I still feel like this defense is so much better when they have Aleem. And I think we saw that last year. Even once Aiden went down, while they did miss him, it was nice having Aleem as a guy in the middle that you knew was going to create pressure, that was going to wreak havoc in the wake of not having your star defensive end. Aleem still went out there, had 45 pressures, had 3.5 sacks, had 7 tackles for loss, and you saw him just really coming into his own as one of the guys that they could really rely on in the middle. Like I said, you won't see him for a while as he kind of recovers from the ACL tear. We probably won't see him to maybe October, maybe November at the latest. And in that meantime, we will get to see a lot of Tyleik Williams. We will get to see more of Levi Onwuzurike and the likes of other players on that defensive line. But when Aleem is back, I feel like all eyes should be on him in the same way that they're going to have all eyes on Aiden. How healthy is he? Is he able to return to form? Is he able to really help elevate this defense? And Aleem is someone that hasn't quite yet had a Pro Bowl nod. I think if he's able to come back, if he's able to have a really strong performance, maybe getting into the Pro Bowl might be a little bit hard, especially if he misses a month of the season. but I think he can start to get back on that track, because at least that's where I thought Aleem was going even into last season, that he was starting to push and make a real claim to be one of the better tackles, one of the better defensive tackles, should I say, in the NFC. And number 5 on my list, I'm going to go with Christian Mahogany. Christian Mahogany is someone that we saw get a couple of opportunities last year to start, and now going into this offseason is very much in the thick of that offensive guard battle that the Lions are currently having. Could he start at right guard? Could he start at left guard? And I think if Christian Mahogany is able to prove that what we saw last year wasn't a fluke, wasn't just a flash in the pan, and that he can actually be, one of the next better offensive linemen that the Lions have been able to find later in the draft, this could be really, really good for the Lions going forward. Losing Frank Ragnow, listen, you're not going to replace a player like that so easily, and I'm not saying that Christian Mahogany can do that, but having a young interior offensive lineman with the type of mean streak, with the type of attitude that Christian Mahogany has, is going to do wonders for you, especially as you're trying to makeshift and try and move things around in the interior of the offensive line. We don't know who may end up starting at center. It looks like it could be Graham Glasgow. So if you have Graham being that veteran in the middle, and you're able to have the likes of Christian Mahogany and maybe Tate Ratledge on opposite sides of him, Graham can be that vet in the room to kind of help these guys mature and be in the right space, in the right headspace that they need to be to perform on Sundays and Mondays and Thursdays, right? But at the same time, I think Christian Mahogany showed enough skill set. I'm at least a believer in what we saw in that limited amount of games, right? Like, I'm not trying to make it seem like he's all world, but I think we did get a really nice glimpse. And I think if the Lions can continue to develop that, and Christian can kind of, win a starting job, I think it will go a long way, in my opinion, and calming the nerves and any type of hesitancy that fans may have about the future of this interior offensive line. Now, last but not least, my honorable mention on this list, and I really went back and forth between him and Christian Mahogany, is going to be Terion Arnold. Terion is still someone that I'm very much going to be honed in on going into his sophomore year. Listen, I know a lot of people were hard on Terion because he did look very much like a rookie through those first few weeks of the NFL season. He did not look like the dominant corner that a lot of people made him out to be during the draft process. But Morgan and I say this all the time. I feel like this is just par for the course of corners that come into the NFL. Yes, you do occasionally get your Sauce Gardners. You do occasionally get your Pat Surtains and things of that nature. But a lot of corners that come into the league, yes, they are studs in the NFL, but they typically struggle once they get to the league. Everybody loves to talk about how great Darius Slay is. We can all look back and remember that Darius Slay struggled during even his rookie year, even into the later parts of the season. And that's when things started to kind of come together. I feel like the same thing happened with Terion. And I think if he's able to really show some improvement and going into his sophomore season, I think this is something that could offer a lot of confidence across the fan base, in that this secondary can be good outside of just having two of the best safeties in the NFL and a really good corner in DJ Reed. If Terion Arnold's able to make that leap and is able to start to reclaim the performance that we saw that made him, a highly touted corner in his draft class, that is going to do wonders. And so that is someone else that I'm going to be definitely keeping an eye on. He just didn't quite make it into my top 5 list. So that's going to do it for my list, guys. I'm super curious on what you guys think. Who else, or who do you think is just as important to be on this list when you're talking about the top 5 Lions players that are under 25 that are worth watching this season? Again, there are plenty of other names that I could have included, that Tim included on his list, that are definitely worth watching. But I could also say, I feel like a lot of those players are players that we're already going to watch anyways. But definitely let me know if there's a hidden gem or someone that you personally are going to have eyes on going into this season. Also, if you're looking for any additional Lions content, you can always head over to prideofdetroit.com. We have new articles being uploaded over there all the time. And if you want to stay locked in on any of the video content that we're doing over here on YouTube, all you got to do is hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Those things help out the channel immensely, but it also makes it that much easier for you guys to find our content in the future. So with all that said, I'm Miko. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you guys in the next one.